What happens when the man you trust with your faith turns out to be a master manipulator? On a sweltering day in Georgia, the secrets of Pastor William Pounds would unravel in the most horrifying way. A longtime spiritual leader and trusted figure in his community, Pounds stood behind the pulpit preaching morality and faithfulness. But behind the facade lay a tangled web of deceit that spanned over a decade. Two women, Kendra Jackson and Vicinda Crawford, had unknowingly shared his love, his promises, and his lies. For years, Pounds had masterfully strung them along, convincing each woman she was the only one. He'd promised commitment, faithfulness, and even marriage to both. But this wasn't just a sordid love triangle. It was a ticking time bomb. The events leading to June 12, 2015, would reveal the dark side of the pastor's charm and charisma. The day that was supposed to celebrate love ended in tragedy. A woman lay dead, a pastor faced murder charges, and a congregation grappled with betrayal. What pushed this man of God to murder?
No. I could never do that. Did you kill her? No. 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 You're right.
Stay with us as we untangle a tale of deception, betrayal, and ultimate justice. Kendra Jackson was a devoted mother of three, a woman whose life revolved around family, faith, and love. She met William Pounds in the early 2000s, and their connection seemed heaven-sent. But in 2005, everything changed when Pounds met Vicinda Crawford. Instead of ending his relationship with Jackson, Pounds saw an opportunity to have it all. He proposed to both women, promising each one a lifetime of devotion while carefully juggling their schedules and emotions. For 10 years, he maintained his double life, becoming engaged to each woman at different times and weaving a web of manipulation that seemed impossible to sustain. To each woman, Pounds offered carefully curated reassurances. When Jackson grew suspicious, he claimed he had ended things with Crawford. When Crawford raised questions, he'd insist that Jackson was out of the picture. It was a delicate balancing act that left both women clinging to the hope of a future with him. But deception has its limits. By May 2015, the facade was cracking. Pounds couldn't keep the charade going forever, and the stage was set for an explosive revelation. May 31, 2015, should have been a joyous occasion at King's Chapel Memorial Church in Perry, Georgia. It was Pastor Appreciation Day, a day meant to honor and celebrate William Pounds' leadership and service. But that day, the walls of his carefully constructed world began to crumble. Pounds arrived at the church with Kendra Jackson by his side, introducing her as his fiancée. She was proud, smiling, and oblivious to the storm brewing around her. But Vicinda Crawford, unaware of Jackson's presence, had planned to surprise her fiancé by attending the service unannounced. When Crawford walked into the church and saw Pounds with Jackson, her heart dropped. The man she was set to marry in less than 2 weeks had been living a lie. The confrontation was immediate and heated. Churchgoers watched in stunned silence as the truth began to spill out. Pounds tried to defuse the situation, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. But Crawford was inconsolable. She stormed out of the church, leaving a bewildered Jackson behind. The stage was set for tragedy. Neither woman knew that their love for this man would soon lead to an unthinkable crime. In the weeks following Pastor Appreciation Day, tensions ran high. Pounds attempted to smooth things over with Crawford, convincing her that Jackson was no longer a threat to their relationship. Despite her doubts, Crawford moved forward with their wedding plans, set for June 12, 2015. Meanwhile, Jackson began to sense that something was wrong. She questioned Pounds, who continued to offer vague reassurances. But her instincts told her otherwise. Friends later revealed that Jackson had confided in them, expressing fears that Pounds was hiding something. Crawford, too, struggled with her suspicions. She couldn't shake the memory of seeing Jackson at church and the realization that she wasn't the only woman in Pounds' life. But like Jackson, she clung to the belief that love and faith would prevail. As the wedding day approached, Pounds found himself cornered. His double life was unraveling, and he could feel the pressure mounting. But instead of coming clean, he made a fateful decision, one that would end in bloodshed. June 12, 2015, dawned like any other summer day in Georgia. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, marking the union of William Pounds and Vacinda Crawford. Instead, it became the day that shattered lives. That morning, Kendra Jackson was found dead from a gunshot wound. According to Pounds, Jackson had discovered his plans to marry Crawford and had become distraught. He claimed she had grabbed his pistol from his bedroom dresser and shot herself in despair. But the crime scene told a different story. Blood pattern analysis and forensic evidence suggested Jackson hadn't fired the gun. Experts testified there was no evidence she had even held the weapon. Instead, the evidence pointed to something far more sinister. Pounds' initial story began to shift under scrutiny. First, he claimed Jackson had taken her own life. Later, he said they had wrestled over the gun and it went off accidentally. But inconsistencies in his statements only raised more questions. Why would a man of God lie about the death of a woman he claimed to love? As investigators dug deeper into Kendra Jackson's death, they quickly realized the pieces didn't fit. The position of her body, the trajectory of the gunshot, and the lack of gunshot residue on her hands all contradicted William Pounds' story. Blood pattern analysis revealed no evidence to support Pounds' claim that Jackson had been holding the gun. In fact, the forensic team testified that the scene appeared staged. It was as if someone had gone to great lengths to make the death look like a suicide. Neighbors also came forward with chilling details. One neighbor reported hearing a heated argument between Pounds and Jackson just hours before her death. Another witness claimed they heard what sounded like a single gunshot, followed by an eerie silence. This isn't just another true crime story. It is a compilation of lessons to be learned with deep insight on how to spot red flags in a relationship. Don't let anybody close to you fall victim of manipulations and betrayal. Do well to share this video, create awareness, and save your community from related crimes or murder. With the mounting evidence against him, Pounds' story began to crumble. Prosecutors argued that he had deliberately killed Jackson to prevent her from exposing his double life. His motive? Protecting his reputation as a pastor and ensuring his wedding to Crawford went ahead as planned. The community was stunned. How could a man who preached love and forgiveness be capable of such a heinous act? During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling portrait of William Pounds as a manipulative and calculating man. He had spent years juggling two women, deceiving both Jackson and Crawford with promises of a future he never intended to deliver. Kendra Jackson had been a devoted partner, but over time, she became a pawn in Pounds' twisted game. Witnesses testified about the black-eyed Jackson had suffered at the hands of Pounds, a sign of his growing desperation to control her. Crawford, too, was a victim of Pounds' manipulation. In court, she revealed how he had convinced her to overlook warning signs, assuring her that Jackson was out of his life. Crawford's heartbreak was evident as she described her disbelief when she learned the truth. But the most damning evidence came from Pounds himself. His ever-changing accounts of what happened that fateful day only deepened the jury's suspicions. In one version, he claimed Jackson had accidentally shot herself while they wrestled for the gun. In another, he insisted she acted in a moment of despair. The inconsistencies were glaring. The jury was left to question, if Pounds was innocent, why did his story keep changing? Throughout the trial, Pounds maintained his innocence. He carried a Bible with him, holding it as if it were a shield against the damning evidence presented in court. But the prosecution wasn't fooled. Perhaps he should have spent more time reading his Bible instead of juggling two fiancées, quipped prosecutor Jason Martin during his closing argument. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs of agreement. The Bible, once a symbol of Pounds' authority as a pastor, became a prop in his attempt to sway the jury. But the evidence spoke louder than his gestures of piety. Crime scene reconstruction showed that Jackson couldn't have fired the fatal shot. Medical examiners testified that the trajectory of the bullet and the lack of residue on her hands ruled out suicide. Witnesses described Pounds as controlling and deceitful. Former congregants shared stories of his charm, which masked a darker side. To the jury, It became clear that Pounds had used his position as a pastor to manipulate not only Jackson and Crawford, but also his entire congregation. Was this the same man who had preached sermons on love, faith, and honesty? After weeks of emotional testimony and damning evidence, the jury finally delivered its verdict: guilty of malice murder. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of the decision sank in. William Pounds, the man once revered as a spiritual leader, was now a convicted murderer. The judge spared no words during sentencing. Judge Howard Z. Sims addressed Pounds directly. "Mr. Pounds, and I'm not going to dignify you by calling you Reverend Pounds. You didn't earn that. You are a liar. You are a manipulator. And frankly, you are an outright charlatan. I don't believe that the truth is in you." It was a scathing condemnation of the man who had betrayed not only the women he claimed to love, but also the faith of an entire community. Pounds was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But for the families of Kendra Jackson and Vicinda Crawford, the verdict was bittersweet. Jackson's children were left to grapple with the loss of their mother, while Crawford struggled to rebuild her life after years of deception. In the aftermath of the trial, King's Chapel Memorial Church faced its own reckoning. Congregants who had once admired William Pounds now questioned how they had been so easily deceived. Jackson's family remembered her as a loving mother and a strong woman who had been caught in Pounds' web of lies. They vowed to honor her memory by seeking justice for other victims of domestic abuse and manipulation. Crawford, though devastated, found solace in the truth. She shared her story to warn others about the dangers of ignoring red flags and trusting blindly. As for Pounds, he began his life sentence behind bars, stripped of the title he had once used to manipulate and deceive. This tragic tale serves as a powerful reminder. Even those who seem trustworthy can hide dark secrets. Stay vigilant, trust your instincts, and remember that true love is built on honesty, not lies. As more details about William Pounds' life surfaced, it became clear that his betrayal ran deeper than anyone had imagined. For over a decade, he had carefully curated the image of a devoted pastor, all while leading a duplicitous life that left two women emotionally shattered. Vicinda Crawford, once blissfully unaware of the truth, began to piece together how Pounds had masterfully played both her and Kendra Jackson. He would propose to each woman, alternating his affections to keep them both believing they were the only one. This cycle of deceit not only broke their hearts, but also showed his complete disregard for the sanctity he preached from the pulpit. Court records revealed Pounds had used scripture to manipulate both women, twisting their faith to serve his selfish needs. He often claimed that God had called him to test their loyalty or that forgiveness was divine, a twisted justification for his actions. Kendra's family recounted how she often doubted Pounds, but was drawn back by his persuasive charm. He knew exactly what to say to keep her hooked, one relative said. These revelations painted a harrowing picture of a man who weaponized trust for his own gain. The fateful day of Pastor Appreciation Day marked a turning point. When Vicinda Crawford unexpectedly arrived at church and saw Kendra Jackson by Pounds' side, her world came crashing down. Congregants later described the awkward tension that hung in the air. Crawford, visibly shaken, reportedly confronted Pounds after the service. The confrontation spilled into the parking lot, where heated words were exchanged. Witnesses said Pounds tried to downplay the situation, claiming Jackson was just a friend, but Crawford wasn't convinced. Behind closed doors, Pounds scrambled to maintain control. He pleaded with Crawford to trust him, spinning another web of excuses. Meanwhile, Jackson began questioning the sincerity of their relationship. This clash set off a chain reaction that Pounds couldn't contain. Jackson, determined to uncover the truth, allegedly told friends she was planning to confront Crawford. "I need to know where I stand," she confided to a friend. Little did anyone know that this confrontation would escalate into a deadly encounter just days later. June 12, 2015, was supposed to be the happiest day of Vicinda Crawford's life, her wedding day. But instead of joy, it was marred by tragedy. That morning, Kendra Jackson was found dead from a gunshot wound. Pounds claimed Jackson had taken her own life in a fit of despair after discovering he was marrying Crawford. But investigators immediately found his story suspicious. The timing alone raised eyebrows. Why would a man preparing for his wedding be involved in such a tragedy? And why had Jackson even been at his home? As law enforcement combed through the crime scene, they uncovered troubling details. Blood patterns and the gun's placement didn't align with a suicide. Moreover, Jackson's emotional state, as shared by friends, contradicted Pound's claims. She had been heartbroken, but determined to move forward, not suicidal. The discovery of Jackson's body sent shockwaves through the community. What should have been a celebration turned into a scandalous nightmare. The pastor's double life had finally caught up with him, and the fallout was just beginning. The congregation at King's Chapel Memorial Church struggled to reconcile the pastor they knew with the man accused of murder. Many felt betrayed, questioning how they could have overlooked the signs of his duplicity. Some loyal followers defended Pounds, insisting he was innocent and the victim of a misunderstanding. But as details of his deceit became public, support waned. Congregants who once hung on his every word now felt ashamed for being misled. Rumors swirled around town. How had Pounds managed to juggle two women for so long? Why had no one noticed the growing tension between Jackson and Crawford? The once respected pastor's name became synonymous with scandal, leaving a stain on the church's reputation. Meanwhile, Jackson's family and friends rallied together, demanding justice. Her children, devastated by the loss of their mother, vowed to see her killer held accountable. She didn't deserve this, her eldest son tearfully told reporters. The community's anger and grief fueled the investigation, ensuring that Pounds would face the full weight of the law. As detectives questioned William Pounds, it became clear that his version of events was far from consistent. Initially, he claimed that Kendra Jackson had taken his pistol and shot herself out of despair. But as investigators pressed him on the inconsistencies, his story began to shift. In one account, Pounds said he and Jackson had struggled over the gun, resulting in an accidental discharge. Later, he insisted he had been trying to calm her down when she suddenly turned the weapon on herself. Each retelling raised more questions than answers. Investigators noted his lack of emotion when recounting the events. For a man who claimed to have just lost someone he loved, Pounds seemed remarkably composed. To the seasoned detectives, his demeanor was less about grief and more about someone trying to cover his tracks. Adding to their suspicions was Pounds' attempt to leverage his status as a pastor during questioning. "I've always been a man of God," he told investigators, as though that alone should absolve him. But the mounting forensic evidence painted a different picture, one of a man who had orchestrated a tragedy to save himself from exposure. The question now wasn't if Pounds was lying, but why. The crime scene told a story that William Pounds couldn't rewrite. Blood pattern analysis revealed that Jackson's fatal wound was inconsistent with a self-inflicted gunshot. The angle of the bullet and the lack of gunshot residue on her hands strongly suggested that someone else had pulled the trigger. Forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the scene. They demonstrated how the gun had likely been fired from a distance, a fact that directly contradicted Pounds' claim of a close-range struggle. Their testimony left no room for doubt. Kendra Jackson's death was no accident and certainly not a suicide. The prosecution also presented damning evidence of physical abuse. Jackson had sustained a black eye in the days leading up to her death, an injury witnesses attributed to Pounds. It painted a chilling picture of a man who resorted to violence when he felt control slipping through his fingers. In court, the jury listened intently as experts dismantled Pounds' narrative. Each new revelation further eroded his credibility, leaving him with nowhere to hide. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. How would Pounds explain away the irrefutable science that exposed his lies? The emotional testimonies from Kendra Jackson's family and Vicinda Crawford left the courtroom in tears. Kendra's children described a mother who was full of love and life, someone who had dreams of a brighter future. Her eldest son shared how she had confided in him about her doubts regarding Pounds, but had always hoped he would change. Crawford's testimony was equally heart-wrenching. She recounted how Pounds had made her feel special, only to discover she was part of a sinister game. "I thought he was my soulmate," she said through tears. "But he was living a lie. Both women had trusted Pounds, believing his promises of a shared future. Instead, they were left as collateral damage in his pursuit of self-preservation. The jury couldn't ignore the human cost of Pounds' actions. Kendra's life had been cut short, and Crawford was left to pick up the pieces of a life built on deception. Their stories weren't just a cautionary tale. They were a plea for justice. In their final argument, the prosecution delivered a scathing critique of William Pounds. This man stood in a pulpit and preached about love, truth, and faith, the lead prosecutor began. But behind closed doors, he was a manipulator and a fraud. The prosecution laid out the timeline of Pounds' deceit, painting a vivid picture of a man who thrived on control. They reminded the jury of the forensic evidence, the conflicting statements, and the testimonies from Jackson's and Crawford's families. This wasn't a crime of passion, the prosecutor argued. This was a calculated act to silence a woman who knew too much. The courtroom was silent as the prosecutor delivered their closing statement. William Pounds betrayed his congregation, his fiancée, and his lover. But most importantly, he betrayed the trust of Kendra Jackson, and for that, he must be held accountable. The jury deliberated for hours, poring over every detail of the case. When they finally returned, the tension in the courtroom was unbearable. Guilty, the word echoed through the room, sealing William Pounds' fate. He was convicted of malice murder, a verdict that brought some measure of justice to Kendra Jackson's grieving family. Pounds showed no emotion as the sentence was read, but for the victims' families, the conviction was a long-awaited acknowledgement of the truth. William Pounds was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the eyes of the law, justice had been served, but the scars left behind would take far longer to heal. Kendra Jackson's family and Vicinda Crawford found solace in the fact that Pounds could no longer manipulate or hurt anyone else. Their story became a stark reminder of the dangers of blind trust and the devastating impact of deceit. For the congregation of King's Chapel Memorial Church, the trial was a painful lesson in the fallibility of even the most trusted figures. They vowed to rebuild their faith, grounded in transparency and truth. This tragic tale leaves us with one question. How well do we really know the people we trust? If you found this story shocking, heartbreaking, and full of lessons, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with friends and family to raise awareness about the dangers of deception and manipulation in relationships. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories and updates that keep you informed and engaged. Stay vigilant, and always remember, justice may take time, but it will eventually prevail. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.